Hello, ladies. So, if it wasn't given away already, we're talking about Queen Esther tonight. And we all know how she had God's favor, how she raised to power. But her life wasn't always peaches and cream. You heard a little bit there, and I'm going to elaborate more. Her life actually started with loss and hardship. She became orphan at a very young age, and therefore had to be taken care of by her cousin Mordecai, who, despite being a Jewish man, he still had a good position working for the king in the palace. And so he takes her in. There's nothing saying whether he had other children or not, but he takes her in, treats her as his own, raises her. And they're just Jewish people living in a foreign land during the reign of King Xerxes, which was way after what we saw here on the video. And it was during the Persian Empire, and they were living as exiles because they had been kicked out of Israel many years before. And so, quick fun fact, did you know that Esther is the only, or the book of Esther is the only book in the Bible that does not mention the name of God at all in the Bible? Well, I'm sure you do, because I'm surprised you probably know all the answers if we start asking questions. But yes, so it doesn't mention his name at all. But if we pay close attention, we can see that even from the beginning of her life, his hand is at work. His favor is at work in her life. And so it reminds me of the game chess. If you've ever played chess, you know that it's a game of strategy and precision. And you make one move already knowing what the next couple of moves are going to be, and pretty much predicting, if you're really good, how your opponent is going to move. And so I believe this is what he did with Esther, was he moved every piece on her chessboard with strategy and precision because he wanted to use her for his ultimate plan. And so for a little backstory, forwarding about 4,000 or 400 years after this video, King Xerxes was the king of Persia at the time, and he had just gotten over his third year of ruleship. And so to celebrate, he threw a banquet, a lavish banquet, no expenses spared, for his nobles, his officers, and it lasted 6 months. I want to go to a party that lasts that long. But after that, he threw an additional banquet of 7 days because he didn't want to stop partying. So he threw another one, and this time it was for all the people, from the poorest to the richest. And now, I don't know about you guys, but when he says banquet, can you imagine a 7-day buffet with an open bar? Now, if that's not a party, I don't know what is. I don't think I could hang as long as they did, but hey, on the 7th day, after they've had all this to drink and all this to eat, the king summons his wife, Queen Vashti. He wants to parade her around all his guests, wearing her royal crown. And she refuses. Some scholars say that she refuses because the royal crown was all he wanted her to wear. Whether that's true or not, we'll never know. But the point is that she refused. And we can imagine the king with his, high standards and being at minimum tipsy after 7 days. He felt humiliated, disrespected, and a little ticked off. And so it was the perfect time for his council members to influence and manipulate him the way they wanted him to go. And so they said, oh, no. We can't take this disrespect. We have to fix this disgrace that happened to the king and to us, because somehow they were affected by this disrespect, right? And so their idea was for the king to decree that all the women in 127 provinces that were under the king's rule had to respect their husbands, from the poorest to the richest. They had to respect them. Meanwhile, simultaneously, they're stripping Queen Vashti from her position, from her title. She's never to see the king again because she's vanished. And, of course, they have to find a queen that is more worthy than her to take her place. And so in order for them to do this, they decided, the council, that they were not going to have one or the most beautiful. No, they were going to have all the beautiful virgins of all 127 provinces brought to the castle to undergo preparations and treatments to then be presented one by one before the king so that he could decide who pleased him the most and crown her as the next queen. So it's nothing like the movies that we've seen of, The Princess Diary with Anne Hathaway, and it's, just like girly and cute. No. If we pay attention, what's happening here today we call kidnapping and human trafficking, okay? And these girls, it's said that they were anywhere between the ages of 12 and 14, maybe 15. But if we go by today's standard, they're still so young-minded. And so in their innocence, they were most likely taken against their will, right? And so imagine the pain that their parents must feel, aside from the fear that they have because they're taken away, stripped from everything that they've ever known. Imagine the pain of their parents not knowing what fate awaits their child or if they're ever going to see them again. But the despair that they can't do anything about it. Now, today in age, over my dead body. But back then, it wasn't the same thing. But God always has a way of turning our brokenness into a beautiful masterpiece. And so putting quickly aside all that ugliness, right? One would think, a year of facials, mani-pedis, massages, what, treatments, oils? Who wouldn't want that, right? It's not that bad. Except that they would undergo all this preparation for just one opportunity, one chance, one audition to impress the king in a one-night stand. So you go through all that to either please the king and be crowned, or just to be added to the long line of mistresses and servants back in the castle for the rest of your life. The biggest problem with this process of finding the one is that it took years. When you think about how many girls out of 127 provinces, when all the beautiful virgins were taken out, not just a few, all of them, we're talking about so many little girls. And it said that it took him about 4 years to finally call Esther for her turn. That's 4 years of uncertainty. That is equal to 1,461 days, and possibly that same amount, if not more, of girls whose innocence was stolen, humiliated, disgraced, and feeling like they were worthless and not good enough because they were not chosen, and have to go back to being nothing, if they were ever summoned again to be with anyone. And so basically an entire generation of women was destroyed for one man, his pleasure and his selfishness. So going back to Esther, when this is happening, that they're all being taken, out of fear from her cousins' thought of maybe them not treating her as fair, he told her, do not tell anybody that you are Jewish. Don't tell anybody where you came from, because it's not going to go over well. And you can definitely not tell them that your name is Hadassah, because that is a very Jewish name. So from now on, you're going to be called Esther, which is a more suitable Persian name. So we see in Esther 2, 7, and 9, Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter. When her father and mother died, this girl was so lovely in form and beautiful, was taken to Xerxes' palace and entrusted to Haggai, who was in charge of the harem. So that's a separate place in the palace for the wives, the servants, and the concubines, the mistresses. The girl pleased him, meaning Haggai, the one that was in charge, and won his favor. Immediately, he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. She got favor in his eyes. He assigned her 7 female attendants selected by the king's palace, and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Talk about favor. Remember, she was one of thousands. This shows us how God is always in the details. In Esther 2, 15 and 17, it says, when the turn came for Esther, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the harem, suggested. So they had the opportunity to put on priceless jewels, put on whatever they wanted. And some of them couldn't even walk because they were so, full of so many pounds. But she chose absolutely nothing. And so Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. The king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen. Now, to get this far, we must understand the heart of servitude and obedience of Esther. She was not a dumb little girl. She knew that she needed to do what God was calling her to do, even though she didn't know what it was at the time. And because of the counsel received along the way, I like to call them angels, we see how Esther went from an orphan Jew to a Persian queen, and how she, through her, God changed the history of her people. Here's another fun fact. Did you know, I'm sure you know, did you guys know that she is the great-grandmother of King David, the little shepherd boy who defeated Goliath? So her story is one of courage. It's one of faith and divine providence. Like, she was under the direct care of God himself. And she's a true testament of his favor and his grace, and the perfect example that God can use anyone, no matter your age, no matter who you are, where you come from, or what you've done, because none of us are perfect. So what's this favor I keep talking about? By Google's definition, favor means approval, support, preference for, or a liking for someone or something. Now, I like a lot of things. I love a lot of things. I support a lot of people in my life, and I approve of a lot of things. But God's favor is not the same. I'm talking about divine favor. It's so different. It's so deep and more meaningful. It's something that we cannot explain. And it's more than just goodwill. See, God's grace is action. It's his hand in action over our lives. And believe it or not, his favor and his grace, it's not for us to just use as we please. It's not for our personal gain. But it does give us the strength to navigate challenges. And it gives us the wisdom to make the right decisions. And it gives us the influence to impact the world around us. And it allows us to be a blessing to others. So said differently, favor is what makes things unfair on your behalf. Favor opens the doors that no man can shut. Case in point, one God-fearing, obedient girl out of countless. God's favor puts you in positions no one can take away. Favor is what set Esther in front of the kings and queens when she came from nothing. And she was no one. Favor is what we need in our lives, especially when we face adversity and trials. When we can't explain what's happening, because maybe we can't even see it coming together yet, but everything just starts to fall in place like a puzzle, that all the pieces fit together perfectly, that's his grace and his favor. And it's for his purpose and his glory, not ours. So I want to share two quick things with you about God's favor. Number one, it's living and walking in God's favor, which requires obedience, faith, and trust. It's about acknowledging God's hand in our lives and responding to the call, even when it doesn't make sense. No, scratch that. Especially when it doesn't make sense. And even more so when we don't want to, right? And so, for example, it's not a coincidence that we're all here tonight. God wasn't surprised when my mama and your mamas came out pregnant with you. You're here by design. And it says it in the Word. If you don't believe it, let's help you out with that. Psalms 139, 13 through 16 says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, you and your eyes, only his, saw our unformed body. All of the days before me, or all of the days ordained for me, were written in your book before one of them came to be." So nobody's here by chance. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set each and every one of you apart." And lastly, Matthew 10:30. "Even the hairs on your head are all numbered." Now, some of us have a little bit more hair than others, okay? But just the thought that he took his time to create each and every one of us the way that he did just tells me that just like Esther, you and I, all of us, have been placed here for such a time as this. And so Esther's beauty and character granted her the favor in the king's eyes, and he crowned her. But don't get it twisted. She wasn't like Queen Vashti, who just had a title. No, her rise to power came with a lot of weight. And she had her challenges, which we'll talk about later. So being queen in her case was a privilege because of favor and because of grace, but it was an enormous responsibility. And number 2, the impact of divine favor. When we accept and embrace divine favor, it doesn't only transform our lives, but the lives of those around us. We are women blessed with favor. Do we all agree? That doesn't sound convincing. Do we all agree? Yes. Okay. And because we are blessed with favor, we have the potential to uplift, encourage, inspire, and move people. We become God's vessels of love and grace, and we create this ripple effect. Have you ever seen in a lake when you throw a rock just the perfect way and it skips, but it makes a ripple in the water? That's us. And the more ripples that we make, not only do they change our lives, but the lives of generations to come. Proverbs 31 speaks of a woman who is virtuous and capable, and because of the divine favor over her, she impacts those around her profoundly. And so I want to encourage each and every one of us to seek and embrace the divine favor God has over our lives. Use the gifts, the talents, and the callings that is over each and every one of you, because we all have one. Whatever it is, we all have one. And let's remember to always look for guidance and be open to submit to his will, whether you like it or not, whatever it may look like. It may not make sense now, but you will see it. And if you don't see it, generations after you will. She didn't know what she was doing. And because of her, we have our Jewish Messiah. She didn't know at the time. She didn't get to see it. But we get to see it. And so divine favor doesn't mean that life is going to be hunky-dory. It's not going to have any challenges. On the contrary, we're in the spotlight, and we have those challenges. And they don't get easier, but we do get stronger. If anything, like Esther, it's just an assurance that with God, we can get through anything. Amen? Let's turn our attentions back to the TV.